Every game in the Final Fantasy series has such a wide, diverse cast of interesting characters with various backgrounds, motivations, and trials and tribulations that they have to go through. But if any main party member in a game like that stands out more than the rest, it would have to be the main playable character. I mean, it's hard to get characters like Cloud Strife, Zidane, Squall, and so on and so forth out of one's head. They're the character that we play the most with throughout the entire game, and therefore the one whose struggles and stuff we tend to care the most about. For a while, one of my favorite Final Fantasy protagonists was Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. Granted, I hated him at first, but he eventually grew on me as his character arc progressed. Frankly, I think his character arc is one of the best in the entire series, especially thanks to the genuinely heartfelt romance between him and Dagger. However, in 2024, I played Final Fantasy XV for the very first time, and I quickly fell in love with the main party. Their dynamic is absolutely incredible. And, very quickly, Noctis Lucis Caelum became my favorite protagonist. Noctis, the 113th King of Lucis and the son of Regis Lucis Caelum, is, in my opinion, one of the most tragic Final Fantasy protagonists in the entire series. Granted, I know it's pretty common for Square Enix games to have doomed protagonists. I mean, look at Zack Fair from Crisis Core, Tidus from Final Fantasy IX, or the Wayfinder trio from Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. However, Noctis was the second one of his kind I had ever seen in the Final Fantasy series, and frankly, unlike characters like Zack Fair, we didn't know Noctis' fate from the beginning. In this video, I will do my best to analyze Noctis' story, along with his character arc and the prophecy of the Chosen King. I do have some disclaimers here first though. Obviously, there are going to be major spoilers in this video for the entire story of the game and a bit of the Dawn of the Future novel. As you can see from the runtime of this video, I have a lot of ground to cover here. I can't really skip over too much of the main game's events as, well, Noctis is the main character. If I were to skim over things and not summarize them properly, this wouldn't be a very good analysis, now would it? So, let's get into it. I'm Vince, host of Vince's World of Lore. Let's get into analyzing the story of Noctis Lucis Caelum. To get things started, I don't think we can really talk about Noctis and his character arc without really getting into the prophecy that foretold the coming of the Chosen King. That destiny is, lore-wise, the sole reason why Noctis exists, at least in the way that we see him in the main game. So we may as well get right into it. If you don't know about the end of the game yet and want to play it mostly spoiler-free, this is your last chance to leave. This game will have major spoilers and some kind of heavy themes, so that's normal for a Square Enix game. So, from the beginning of the game, we know really little about the actual prophecy. After all, the first chapter of the game is dedicated to trying to get Noctis to Altissa so he can marry Lunafreya. The earliest mention of the prophecy is actually the text on the very first loading screen, which reads, "In a time unknown, only a prophecy keeps hope alive in people's hearts. When darkness veils the world, the King of Light shall come." It's very vague, and intentionally so. Hell, from an early flashback of Lunafreya and Noctis, we only earn a couple more lines that don't even explain much of anything. To crown the King of Light is the calling of the crystal. Only the true king anointed by the crystal can purge our star of its scourge. But just what does that even mean? Well, millennia before the main game, there was an outbreak of a parasite that began mutating creatures, both man and beast alike, into monsters. This infection would later be called the Star Scourge, Plasmodium malari, and the Demon Infection. And the infected would soon be called demons. The main game is generally nebulous about the origins of the infection, but the German translation of the game outright states that the meteor found at the Disk of Cophis, the one that was cast down during the Age of the Gods before they fell into slumber eons ago, is the source of the infection. How or why this is the case is completely unknown, but I personally theorize that Bahamut could very well be the source of it for many reasons. No matter how it got there though, the infection ravaged the land. It was especially bad 2,000 years ago, right around the time of the founding of the Kingdom of Lucis. If you've played the game and all its DLCs, you know the tale. Two brothers, Arden and Somnus, were both up for the throne of the first King of Lucis, Guardian of the Crystal, and the first bearer of the Ring of the Lucii. Don't worry, I'm going somewhere with all of this. You see, Somnus was a lot more cold-hearted than his brother, resorting to burning the afflicted instead of offering mercy like Arden did. You see, he was jealous of the fact that people approved of Arden more, even though that was clearly because the gods had given him the ability to take the Star Scourge onto himself, curing the afflicted. In the end, this jealousy came to a head when he lured his sibling into a trap, killed the first Oracle when she tried to block a near-fatal strike from Somnus, and soon sealed Arden away in Angel Guard as he branded him as a monster. When Era, the first Oracle and Arden's fiancé, was killed, Arden had reached out to the crystal to plead for aid from the gods and was basically rejected, thanks to how much of the Star Scourge he had taken upon himself. So, Arden was then sealed away, and Somnus became the very first king of Lucis. The Mystic, as he would later be known by the time of the game. Now, you might be asking, Vincent, why are you bringing this up? This isn't the Arden video. Well, there's two reasons. You see, the prophecy has two sides of it. Two people who were fated to be slain for the good of all, or so it said. First, there's Arden, thanks to the demonic energy inside of him. He's simply unable to permanently die because of that. We see that over the course of the game. Hell, in the final acts of the game, the main party is basically constantly squaring up with him and trying to murder him. But thanks to him having taken on so much of the demonic miasma onto himself, he ended up as an epicenter of the Star Scourge, even being able to turn people into demons with no effort whatsoever. Thanks to this, though, that gave the demons a source that could therefore be destroyed. I hit my microphone. In the alternate ending of episode Ignis, it's outright stated that it's beyond the power of the gods to purge the Star Scourge themselves. So, they needed a champion of sorts. This is where the Lucii come into the picture. Blessed by the light of the crystal, the Lucian kings, and by extension their retainers, are allowed a unique use of magic that's not seen anywhere else in the world. The royal arms do damage against beasts, especially demons, where normal weapons wouldn't be able to. Common items are given restorative properties, and they can wield honest-to-God magic, both in the usual Final Fantasy sense, and also when you look at like the armature from which they can conjure their weapons, and in the magical barrier that was once raised around the Lucian continent to protect it from attackers and demons alike. However, the Ring of the Lucii itself takes a horrible toll on its user, as does maintaining the barrier. The power of the Lucii feed into the prophecy itself. Throughout the course of the game, Noctis collects the 13 royal arms that are scattered across the world. Every time he picks one up and adds it to the armature, it levitates in the air and drives itself straight into his chest. It's a bit symbolic, but he staggers back every time, a look of mild distress or slight pain on his face as he raises a hand to his chest. It feels like a neat animation the first time around, but it does have meaning. The game is so vague about the King's Calling all the way up to basically the end of the game, Chapter 13 to be specific. When Noctis dragged into the crystal after reaching out to it for help, he finds himself face to face with Bahamut, who finally explains what the King's Calling is and just how the world will be freed from demons. And it isn't really a simple fix.
A power greater than even that of the Six, purifying all by the light of the crystal and the glaives of rulers past. Only at the throne can the chosen receive it, and only at the cost of a life, his own. The King of Kings shall be granted the power to banish the darkness, but the blood price must be paid. To cast out the usurper and usher in dawn's light will cost the life of the chosen. Many sacrificed all for the king, so must the king sacrifice himself for all.
To say that that's heavy information would be a severe understatement. Noctis was chosen as the prophesied King of Kings, the supposed savior of a great destiny and a group of close-knit friends. And his purpose as a chosen king, this glorious grand destiny, is to die. He is to be displaced from time for 10 years, floating in the crystal and absorbing all the energy and knowledge within, and then he's meant to sit on the throne for the first and only time, and die. It's not even a quick, painless death. When it happens, it's slow. Blow after blow, Noct looks like he's doing his damn best to stay upright, and almost as an insult to injury, the final blow is dealt by Regis Lucis Caelum, his own father. Noctis is a lamb that is led to slaughter, one who didn't have time to process his fate until it was far too late. Sure, it seems like he comes to terms with it, but that seems more like he has done so because it's a necessity. He doesn't have a choice in the matter. He has to die or the world will be plunged into an eternal night. He is 20 when he learns this. Yeah, he's 30 by the end of the game, but he has not lived for the past decade. His final days are full of stress and both emotional and physical pain. This fate is outright cruel and unfair. But how does that fate impact him throughout the story? And how does it impact those around him? I think it's time to talk about Noctis himself, now that we've outlined his prophesized fate. Let's put aside Noctis' fate for now, and instead talk about his past, specifically his childhood. When Noctis was 3 years old, Ignis Scientia, a young boy only a few years older than him, was appointed as his retainer and eventual advisor. This would eventually spark a friendship that would last most of his life, one that I'll get into in a bit here. But moving on from that, even though Noctis didn't know his fate, his father did. Getting a message from the Lucii or the Astrals themselves is probably how he found out that Noctis would be the chosen king. This information was given to him when Noctis was a mere 5 years old, mind you. 5. King Regis had to bear that. Bear knowing that his beloved son wouldn't live a full life. And he just had to keep that quiet for the next 15 years. He tried so hard to be present and there for his son, but between keeping the magical wall up around Lucis and handling the war against Niflheim, he didn't have that much time. Despite that, he did his damn best to give his child a normal life, even having him be enrolled in a normal school so he could grow up around kids his age and would allow him to get his own apartment later in life. Frankly, all of that was probably a mercy. Noctis deserved to have some semblance of a normal life before everything went to shit. Though it doesn't mean that Noctis' childhood was uneventful. When Noctis was 8 years old on a drive heading back home, the car he was in was attacked by a fearsome demon known as a Marolith. The raging demon killed his attendant and gravely wounded him, though luckily King Regis came in time to save his son from the demon. However, his resulting injury was so severe that the king took Noctis to Tenebrae so he could recover, though he still has a noticeable limp to this day. Seriously, look at his walking and running animation. He does in fact have a limp. Fun fact, Arden has one too. I love little animation details in games. But there's something I'd like to note here. They had been deep within Lucian territory. They weren't within the confines of Insomnia itself, but they were still within the magical barrier that protects the city, I think. The magical barrier that's meant to keep both demons and attackers out. It's very likely that the demon that was unleashed upon Lucian soil there was part of a plot from Niflheim. Maybe an assassination attempt? It's hard to say, but I think it's pretty easy to assume that, seeing what they do next. Still, maybe this attack was a blessing in disguise? There in Tenebrae, Noctis met and befriended a young Lunafreya Nox Flore, Princess of Tenebrae and the future Oracle. They may have only had a very short time together, but it's clear in flashbacks and cutscenes that they must have been fast friends. Luna ended up explaining what the crystal was to Noct, and how King Regis was the protector of it, and also told Noctis that he was the one chosen by the crystal to banish darkness from their world. Granted, Noctis didn't know what that meant yet, but he still readily agreed to do so. They also then promised to keep in touch by sending messages back and forth using a little red notebook that they would send back and forth with Umbra, who is a messenger. I'm not explaining messengers here, just magical dog. Magical dog. But the two didn't get to see each other for long though. In time, Tenebrae was set upon by the Niflheim Empire. It's very likely that Niflheim was intending to kill both King Regis and Prince Noctis in one fell swoop, an attack that was headed by one General Glauca. In this attack, the previous Oracle gave her life to defend her son, Ravus Nox Flore, who called out to Regis as he tried to bring Noct and Luna to safety. Lunafreya, however, let go of his hand to remain with Ravus, who was now in Imperial custody. From then on, Noctis and Lunafreya were only able to communicate with each other via the journals. However, Lunafreya wasn't the only friend that Noctis made in his youth. His relationship with his sworn shield and his sparring partner, one Gladiola Samositia, had a very rocky start. Gladio thought, to put it lightly, that Noctis was basically a spoiled brat. The two didn't really get along much until he brought his sister Iris to meet him. Iris eventually wandered off to chase a random cat, and Noctis was the one to find her and bring her back home much later. Noctis took the fall and the blame graciously, and when Iris informed Gladio of what Noctis did, he gained a new respect for the young prince. As for Prompto, Noctis met him in school, as a friend that he technically met in elementary school but probably made in high school once Prompto felt brave enough and happy with his own self-image enough to become friends with him. Frankly, I think Noctis needed a friend from outside of usual circle that treated him like a normal person. It is outright said that Prompto never treated him like a prince.
Never so much as a highness.
That was probably really good for Noct. Despite Prompto being the newest member of the group, he's clearly a valued member of the team and someone that Noctis is incredibly close with. As for Ignis, as I said before, the two met when he was appointed as Noctis' advisor when he was a mere few years older than the 3-year-old prince. The two grew up together, Ignis ending up taking on a almost like caretaker-like role for Noctis, that it seemed like he took for granted for a good long while. During those same teenage years, the two had some friction with how Noctis was like blowing off his studies, brushing off keeping up with anything happening between Lucis and Niflheim, and was just generally being really irresponsible. However, we later learn in the same animated short that this whole tale comes from that, even though it doesn't really excuse the actions of what Noctis did, but instead rather explains them, Noctis likely struggles with his mental health for one very specific reason in this time period. He's aware more than most teens would be of his dad's mortality. It's likely bad enough for anyone to be reminded that their family's gonna die, and of course a prince would be even more aware of that than most, just with how monarchies work. But I think anyone in the line of Lucis would have it 10 times worse than the average person, and Noctis has the worst possible iteration of that kind of crisis. Noct has seen Regis actively deteriorate as time goes on. But after all, bearing the Ring of the Lucii and maintaining the wall takes an insane toll. It has to be an intense toll after all, what with Regis's gray hair from age and stress, his leg brace, the obvious limp, and the cane he uses to walk. It's pretty easy to assume this is how all of the Lucian Kings turn out in time due to the power of the ring if they live long enough to get to that point. Between seeing his dad deteriorate more and more as time went on, and then having so much weight being on his shoulders, being the quote-unquote chosen king, it's no wonder that Noctis was worried and potentially even depressed due to that fact. Luckily, outwardly expressing all of this did actually help improve the relationship between Ignis and Noct, letting them see eye to eye and let them start to work on more in tandem with each other, instead of Noctis leaving everything to Ignis. Even when considering all of this, and the crown that likely already lay heavily on Noctis' head, he had a relatively normal and happy Crown City upbringing. And with that, we can continue on and start to discuss the main game.